Now I want to stop. We've gone through a bunch. We're going to get into influence activities. Tell me if this is helpful, seeing it like this as we go down. I know it's a lot, but as you see where everything fits, is this helpful? Joe says very. Brilliant. Thanks, Michael. Yeah. Thanks, Bill. Good breakdown. It's going to take some thought and attempts to apply. Yes, it is. And that's the idea, is that now you see, it's like we're pulling back the curtains for you. The structure of the mind map allows you to see how things are interconnected. Yes. A lot to absorb. Sounds fascinating. Yeah, hopefully it gives you new goggles to kind of see that it's not just a one and done thing. And I don't want to oversimplify or overcomplicate, but I do want to show you that there is a way to categorize this way of thinking and this area of mastery for you, because I assume that we all want to get really good at helping people do what it is we need them to do. And that's leadership, right? We all want to become better leaders in whatever realm that we work and live in. And so influence, behavior change, and persuasion is all part of that, all part of being a parent too. Yes, it allows you to see and plan for second, third order effects for sure. And you can see like, oh, that's an area I need to work on. I'm not sure. I don't have that nailed down yet. I need to dig in there. And so it also gives you a map of things that you need maybe to immerse yourself in, and then keep on moving forward, right? Super cool. Yeah, glad you guys are enjoying this. Okay, let's keep moving on. Influence activities. So we've gone through, just a review, we've gone through the psychological principles. We've gone through your influence principles. Excuse me, again, those are psychological principles. It's a process. Mental change precedes how you use subtlety, target versus audience, the continuum, and action as the foundation of influence, right? And then the principles of change requires a catalyst. It does not equate to marketing. It's inherently sensitive. Requires a range of efforts and activities. It's just not a one and done thing. Requires emphasis. Look right here or read this. And messaging in isolation is seldom effective. So get it out there. And then pathways. We looked at the process versus platform, strategy as a skill versus a tactic, the 3 narrative analysis, and then the campaign practices. And then the activities. Here we are. We are at activities. So again, there's more that could fit into this, but there's a lot that would go into, for example, PSYACs. So PSYACs are PSYOP activities, or their engagements, face-to-face engagements. And then altering the operational environment. There's a ton that would go into that. Creating different assets for your business that maximize your authority, building out your different things. And so there's so much you could fit into each one of these. I haven't even listed them, but these would be kind of those activities we'd start with. So being able to shape, I call it shapers versus seekers. A seeker is always looking for, again, the missing piece to a puzzle. They don't have the puzzle to. They're looking for that one missing puzzle piece, but they don't have the rest of the puzzle. So you guys are getting the whole puzzle today. Instead of looking for missing pieces, you're getting the whole thing, and then you determine where you're missing pieces, right? And so a seeker just looks for that missing piece, whereas a shaper understands that there's a whole picture here, and I need to shape that picture for my business, for my life. I need to be proactive and be the architect, not the bricklayer. So shape the environment. And then conducting PSYACs, so face-to-face engagements. How good are you with working with people face-to-face? When I got back, I think it was when I got back from Colombia, I realized I needed help in this area. That I worked with different 3-letter agencies out there, and in the embassy. And there were a lot of high-stakes conversations that I felt like I could have been better in that area. And so I actually went to my friend Chase Hughes, who a lot of you know, and he would be the one I would go to if you want to work on that face-to-face influence. He would be the guy to go to. He's got a great YouTube channel for any free stuff. The behavior panel, look for that, or go to his site, chasehughes.com. But he's excellent and science-based, and it would be everything under the sun for conducting face-to-face engagements. And then creating and disseminating, whether it be messaging material or different digital assets or physical handbills or whatever, creating and disseminating material that create influence. And then shaping or withholding. Again, shaping would be taking a proactive stance on the environment of your market, and then maybe you withhold some things and set boundaries at certain levels just for your own business structure. And so that would cover it for right now for influence activities. And then influence processes. This is the biggest one here. And I'm going to start just by opening up this first one here. So influence processes. So the bread and butter for a psychological operations specialist, the PSYOP guy or gal, would be the 7 phases of the PSYOP process. The phases that we move through to conduct influence operations, military information support operations, or primary operations. And then conducting an area study would be primary within those phases. Reading nonverbal cues would be an influence process. Reading verbal cues would be an influence process. Behavior modification, another one. Belief chains, being able to chain together sequences and logic chains to present meaning to an audience or a person. And then patterns of life and intelligence collection. This is one thing that when I was with the scout team, we would do this. We would look. We would go into hiding on the side of a hill and overlook a population and gather patterns of life and collect intelligence so that we can then conduct the mission. And then deception activities. Again, you and I within business won't be doing that, but that would be in there. Negotiation and persuasion, planning and strategy, target audience analysis, and 3EAD targeting. It's more of a military thing, but targeting for the purpose of going after bad guys. Let's look at the 7 phases of the PSYOP process. I've never taught this before, so it's kind of a big deal. But this is what we go through. So the 7 phases would be to plan your target audience analysis, your series development, your product development design, approval, product distribution, dissemination, and evaluation. Real simple. You would think there's a lot that goes into each one of these. So the planning, we're going to actually go into with the area study here. But again, this should be a strategic high-level plan that includes timelines, that includes what we call centers of gravity, COGS. Centers of gravity is if you hit this domino, how many other dominoes will it affect? So you're not wasting all this energy and resources swinging at the branches. So plan is super important. I'm not hitting it here because it's its own thing. And then target audience analysis. This is really the bread and butter of what somebody in PSYOP does, is they understand a target audience at a very deep level. And they do that so we align all the way up to the national security strategy, which is put out by the president, whoever the president is at the time in their administration. They always put out the NSS, the national security strategy for that administration. And we have to align our operations from the national security strategy down through the geographic commands, through the joint commands, and all the way down to our area. And everything has to align. And the target audience analysis allows us to understand the people so that we can align the operation to be able to influence those people and get an aligned behavior change. So there's a lot that goes into it. The target audience analysis is a living, breathing document. You should have something like this for your business. This should be how you do targeting and audience avatar understanding. It's not just a feel, hear, see, do type empathy map. It's a lot more than that. It's a deep understanding of who they are. It's a dimensional understanding of what their life is like. I call it tactical empathy, stepping into their shoes to be able to understand their experience so you can speak to it better than they can sometimes. But a target audience analysis is a process. It is made up of first identify and refine that target audience. Is it the right target audience? Continue to niche down and get more and more specific. Determine the effectiveness of this target audience. Does this particular audience or market, does this align with the lifestyle I want? And does it align with the prices I want to charge? So how effective is this target audience? Do I need to change audiences, markets? So that's where that testing comes in. Then identify the conditions that they find themselves in. What's their economic status? What's the what are their political beliefs? So social things going on, psychological aspects, things like the way they see themselves and the things that kick off as a result of that. What is their community like? And in the military, we'd look at what's the military like, right? But what are the conditions that our audience lives under and lives in every day? Very dimensional. And then identify their vulnerabilities. Again, in Operation Christmas, the vulnerability was Christmas. It was they wanted to leave the jungles at Christmas to be with their family. And so the messaging centered around that event. Operation Christmas. Determine susceptibility. Are they susceptible? Are they susceptible to to a certain style of messaging? Are they susceptible to a certain platform? And so are they susceptible? And then accessible. Can we access them, or are they in the jungles hidden? So if they're in the jungles hidden, we're not going to do like a billboard, right? Unless it's in the jungle like they did. We're going to use the radio and only use like the pirate radio stations that they'd be on. We're going to use handbills or whatever it is, because that's the only way they're accessible. And then we're going to develop a PSYOP argument and recommended PSYOPs. So PSYOP argument is, if I do this, my audience will do this. And then the recommended PSYOPs is, what are the face-to-face engagements that I need to plan to make my audience do this, to fulfill that argument? And then refine the assessment criteria. How am I, am I assessing this in a complete and effective way to where I understand them better and better all the time? So that would be the target audience analysis process. And then series development is just product, is you're developing out the series. I call it the core myth. It's the different sequence of stories with built-in belief chains. And then the product development, what is it, a webinar, a VSL? Is it an email series? Is it a mix of different things? Is it a program? And then make sure with approval, you're the approver, right? And then product distribution dissemination, what channels am I getting it out on? And then evaluate the effectiveness of what you're doing. So that is the 7 phases of the PSYOP process. What are your thoughts after you see that this is kind of the process of what somebody in psychological operations goes through? What is your thoughts on that? Because I'll tell you what I thought. I thought, man, this is perfect for a business person to learn. Everybody that is an entrepreneur ought to know how to do this stuff. And when I was going through the different the training pipeline for SAP, I was like, this is a perfect training. This is a perfect kind of like framework to train somebody going through, like trying to become a successful entrepreneur or business owner. And so those are my thoughts. I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are on it, if you have any at this point. I know it's a lot. If you don't have anything, we'll dig into area study. So there are different ways you can study target audience and understand their situation, understand who they are, what their life is like. And so these would be kind of some of the different frameworks we've used to do an area study, so that that would be an influence process, right? And so to get ready for the 7 phases of PSYOP, we would study the area to get to know them. Sometimes we have PhD level historians focused on, for example, I was in South America, focused on South America. They would help me understand a lot deeper these certain areas. And we use these frameworks forgive the acronyms, but I'll describe them here. ASCOPE and PSYOP. These two act as kind of a matrix. You'd have ASCOPE across the top, PSYOP along the side. And as these boxes come together, you would look at these different variables within your study. So with ASCOPE, you'd look at the area, the structures, capabilities, organizations, people, and events. With PSYOP, it stands for political, military, economic, social, information, infrastructure, physical, time. So let me explain these real quick. So if I were to go ASCOPE, area on the top, and then political on the top, and those come together in a box, right? So I would look at what's the political situation like in this particular town. So that's how to look at that. Or what's the military situation like, or police in this town? Or what are the structures, or what are the capabilities of how economically stable are they? Or how active are the people in this area? Do they go to the beach? Do they go to the shopping center? Do they go shopping on Saturdays? And so we layer these two areas together to better understand these different aspects of their lives. And then physical, like what's their actual geography like, and time, like how do they see it? Like people see time in South America a lot different than we see it in North America. Whereas or Latin-based countries have the siestas, and so they'll take naps, or they'll kind of take more time off. They won't be as hurried. In some of the cities, it's not like that. They're more hurried, like we are here in the States. But time is a little bit different depending on what culture you come from. So that would be how those two work together. And then DIME, I've already talked about, would be for narrative analysis. We look. This is actually a different one. This is for diplomatic, information, military, and economic, a way to kind of look at those different areas. And then again, the center of gravity analysis. I think somebody's not on mute. If you could all check your mute, please. Thank you. Awesome. And then center of gravity analysis is just really, again, looking for that one domino that we can knock over to get the biggest effect, to not waste energy or resources, and then do a language and a cultural analysis. So there's a lot of overlap sometimes with some of this and some of this, but this is what goes into an in-depth area study as part of a process of conducting influence operations. Reading verbal cues. Actually, some of this comes from some of the teachings of Chase Hughes. Again, the best in this area: elicitation, human needs and conversation, pronoun usage, and understanding, are they internally or externally focused, their sensory preference, their adjective usage, and identity statements. When you're speaking with a person, having a face-to-face engagement, verbal cues, or not body language, right? Just not being able to read and use language is important to be able to both control and understand better your audience. So reading verbal cues. Bill says, this is excellent source of material for marketers. This is a parallel world in identifying the market of interest and how to best communicate with them. Yes, another key element would be to consider how well do you expect you can influence A versus B, because there's always the problem of limited resources, and you need to choose how to make the largest impact for the money. Absolutely, Bill. Again, if you understand the whole picture and process, then you can be more effective in where you spend those things. Reading verbal cues, behavior modification. This is a big one. So classical conditioning, positive, negative reinforcement, extinction, fading, shaping, changing, all different uses for clinical settings. Successive approximation. You can look up some of these things. I'm not going to dig into them. It's just psychological processes. In sleep deprivation creates behavior change. Bottom line. Sensory overload, love bombing, love attention deprivation, displays of authority, priming, linguistics, double binds, confusion, interruptions, fractionation, prolonged exposure therapy, dissociation, regression, scarcity, regret, shame. So a lot can be done to change behavior based on some of these different tactics and techniques. Again, I would implore you to do anything and everything you do for the benefit of the person you're doing it to or for, right? But that's where all of these behavior modification steps would fit into the influence process. Again, belief chains. I do this with clients in building their offers and messaging. It's being able to set up a sequence of beliefs, understanding where they're at and where you want to take them, and being able to set up a chain of logic that gets them to where you want them to go. and then patterns of life until collection. We're going to talk about that. Let's talk about so negotiation persuasion. I didn't even list the steps in here. There's a lot that goes into that. Chris Voss has a great book on that. I've read a few times. I've taken a class in my MBA for it. I've done it in the military and in life and in sales. And so understanding, I think the best lesson I ever learned for negotiation persuasion is look for the not win-win. Never split the difference with Chris Voss. Yes, that would be the one I was talking about, Joe. The best. I had a really great class in my MBA, like where. So let me give you a quick summary of this technique or this strategy, this way to look at it with negotiation and persuasion. So this company wanted to hire this person, but they wanted to take a cruise around the world, and so they weren't quite ready to come to work. But they also wanted more money than what the company was willing to give them. And so in a traditional negotiation environment, that would they would butt heads. I want more money. Well, we want to pay you less money. So the out of the box thinking type of negotiation, I think that really is the one to shoot for, is maybe a situation where the couple wanted to sell around the world. So the company, instead of paying them more, they said, we'll give you free gas at all these ports, because it was an oil company. We'll give you free gas at all the ports you're going to go to. And then we'll give you the time to take your vacation, and we'll give you a signing bonus. And all of that met the company's objectives of not paying them as much, but then it also met the couple's met their criteria as far as they wanted to enjoy their cruise and have a job when they came back. So it's out of the box thinking like that in negotiation that really, instead of browbeating somebody or being tough on somebody, those never work, because a man or woman persuaded or changed against their will is of the same opinion still. It's something I learned a long time ago. Let's talk about planning and strategy as part of the influence process. This is a big one. Boss was just on the Huberman podcast. Oh, I'm going to check that out. Thank you. Okay, planning and strategy. So I'm just going to touch on some of these. Again, it's big, and some of it's just military stuff, but I think it's cool to see it. The Prometheus process that I take clients through is design the future, target for success, campaign to win, finish with finesse. There's a lot that goes into that, but that's simply kind of how those are the 4 steps of it. The military decision-making process, how we make decisions in the military. We receive the mission, we analyze the mission, we develop course of action, analyze the course of action, compare course of action, and then get it approved, and then create orders, send those out to the team, and then they get the situation, mission, execution, sustainment, which is admin logistics, and then command and signal, which is the control aspect of it. And then that goes out to principles of mission command. There's a story about little groups of paratroopers during World War II. The Americans were dropped into France, and they were scattered to the wind. But because they had these principles of mission command, they were trained into them. They beat the Germans at the time because they made themselves look like a bigger force than they really were. So the Germans, every time, because the American paratroopers went in, they understood these things. The Germans thought that they were being overrun when it was just these little groups of paratroopers going through. And so this is a cool set of principles to understand for you and your team, that you always build in competence, mutual trust, shared understanding, commander's intent. They understand the intent of the leader, the mission command orders. They understand the orders, the disciplined initiative. They take this disciplined initiative, and they always accept a reasonable amount of risk, right? So that would be the military decision-making process, this big one. And then narrative analysis. I touched on this, but in looking at a narrative and analyzing how people see themselves at a cultural level, we're using, this is a Jeep Man's framework of MICS, meaning, identity, content, structure. And within meaning, we're doing potentially propaganda analysis. I did some of this in Columbia, where you're looking at, and this is actually useful for you and me looking at television commercials or the news or whatever. And you're feeling like, they're not telling me the whole story. This sounds kind kind of prepackaged. It sounds a little like propaganda to me. And so being able to analyze that, understand what's their intent in sharing this message, who is the source of the message, and what are they trying to communicate with the message. That would be kind of a propaganda analysis using the SCAME model. Narrative campaign catechism. These are questions to ask. It's like a doctrine of questions to understand before you plan a narrative campaign. And then CA narrative framework. We won't go into that now. Narrative identity theory is the science behind narrative analysis. If you want to look that up, it's a fascinating area of study that you'll find a lot of Ajit Mann and her stuff in there. And then content, recreating stories or myths. Stories would be maybe one-offs, where a myth is like a sequence of stories, and it's the character development, and it's all these different things that go along with the myth. It's way more powerful. And then narrative campaign practices. What different types of campaigns are you going to use for the situation? And then structure. The structure of a narrative it's meant to unify events. It implies sequence. It implies cause and effect. It prohibits alternatives, and it prohibits conflicting interpretations. It's also not universal. Like, for example, the hero's journey is not a universal narrative theme. It is a Western narrative theme of the pull yourself up by the bootstraps, rugged individual, right? That's a narrative theme. If you go like the Middle East or Asian countries, the hero's journey it's not really the rugged individual is not the way they make meaning. It's more community based. It's I'm part of a bigger family and community. I'm part of something bigger. And so it's not the individual, it's the community aspect of it. And so it's not universal. And the different structures would be linear, cyclical, or ongoing. And then DIME would be what we do in the Narrative Discovery Challenge, desire, identity, myth, and evolution. We build that into your business and into your own story. And then target audience analysis, we already went through that. And then 3EAD is how we put together what we call packets on chasing bad guys. We won't get into that. It's not really relevant for you, but it's part of the processes. That was a massive one. We're at an hour and 10 minutes. I want to make sure we're doing okay. I'm respecting your time. We'll probably go for another 30 minutes. So if you need to jump off, that's fine. But again, I'd love for you to stay, and we'll send that blueprint to everyone that makes it to the end. Thanks, Joanne and Joe.